Welcome to We Can Talk About That, a Christos Community Church podcast that dives into difficult or uncomfortable topics that impact today's church. All right, welcome to the second edition of We Can Talk About That. Today we are going to be responding to an article on whether or not multiracial congregations can bridge the racial divide. So this article is one that I stumbled upon back in the summer. You guys may remember there were lots and lots of protests around racial equality in the U.S. This year. And so I think this article was kind of written in that context. And obviously for Christos Community Church, our goal is to worship in diversity. And so this really hits home with us. So that's the reason why I wanted to talk about it today with you, Alex. What ideas do you have about this?
It's a very interesting article. I think it's one of those sources of information, or maybe that's not the right term, but it's from outside the church. So this is not something, NPR is not famous for providing guidance to the church. And it shouldn't be like that. However, I think this is something that we need to consider. It's one of those, I really appreciate it because it's one of those things that people looking from the outside towards us is telling us, this is what we expect from you guys, basically. And I do appreciate that. And I think we need to pay close attention to some of the ideas that are presented in the article. So I enjoy it. It's very good. We should read it. We all should read it.
Awesome. Yes. And we'll post a link to it in the description below so that you guys will be able to read it for yourselves. It also comes with a little, you can listen if you'd rather listen rather than read. So, well, then let's dive right into it. Like I said, the thesis of the article or the headline is multiracial congregations may not bridge the racial divide. So what do you think the author means by bridging the racial divide?
Yeah, I think that's from the get-go, we're going to have a difference of opinion. And I'm glad that you mentioned when the article was published, because clearly to me, that is the intention. There's a social or political intention. I don't mean this in a bad way, but there is a social or political intention in the article more than a theological one or ecclesiastology. More than that,
ecclesiastical.
There is ecclesiastia. That's a difficult word. So I think what the writer wants to see is different cultures being respected and honored, human cultures respected and honored in the church. I got the vibe that the writer wants to see something similarly to what is happening in the public school. In the public school, we have that level of integration or reconciliation, I guess, or that the divide is not that. Well, maybe it is, but there's an intention from the public school to honor and respect and bring forward every culture, and we have almost like one culture per month at the public school that we observe or we honor. So I think that's the idea of the writer. The writer is saying, like, we should expect this in the church of all places, since they seem to be talking about this, God and love and peace, and differences between races should not be easy to identify within the church. I think that's the direction he's going.
Okay. Do you kind of agree with the basic premise of that, or like what do you? What you said you kind of open up that we're going to disagree a little bit. So like how would you tweak the premise there?
Yeah, and I think it's gonna sound weird, but I think there is this naive idea that um, an absolute, total, perfect social or racial reconciliation can be obtained on this earth. I think there is this idea that we can find a formula that will bring that divide to an end. Um, so that's the first thing that I want to say. Um, and then the other is proximity is never the only solution. Like he makes the writer makes the statement or presents the idea that, well, if people worship together, then they're supposed to be able to um, enjoy reconciliation or have this social racial divide removed. Um, but it's more than that. It's not just worship because it's an issue of the heart. Um, so I'm not saying that that's not a good goal. That's not what the church should be about. But we have to be careful that we don't limit the function of the church or the purpose of the church just to this social aspect in our communities. That's one thing. And the other is that uh, we should not expect it to happen perfectly. It's not going to happen perfectly. We can something that I think that the article lacks is a set of indicators that the divide is being shrink.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's something that the, they fail to present. That it's not going to disappear from one Sunday to the next. But the question to me is: are there any indications that is moving into that direction? Are there any indicators that the social, cultural distinctions, racial distinctions are being reduced because we worship in a culturally diverse church? That to me is the question. Are there indicators? Not that it's taking is. I don't think it's going to happen perfectly. We are reminded constantly how different we are, and sometimes we do embrace that differences. Like at our congregation, every 4 years we have this issue, and I'm not talking about politics. I'm talking about the World Cup.
Mm-hmm.
Every 4 years we fight over, like, my team is better than yours and my country is better than yours. Well, we don't fight really,
Right.
uh, but there's that sense of, even when I worship, and I have been worshiping with this group of people for a long while, and I believe in the vision of the church, and every now and then I'm reminded that it's okay to be Venezuelan and that it's okay to be from Puerto Rico, and that is not necessarily wrong, but we see evidence that it's less and less important, those distinctions. So the article, all this to say that I think is holding the church to a very high standard, almost to an impossible standard, which sounds weird because we serve the God who can do the impossible. Um, but there are humans involved here, so that's the, I guess, the main difference that I have with the article. When should we expect to see this divide disappeared?
Right. So what were some of the things that you found in the article that were surprising to you?
One thing, the first thing is the quality of the article. This is not something written, um, quickly, or it looked like they treated the topic as an important topic, and I that was surprising. The caliber of the people involved, sociologists and everyone who participated and give their opinion, that was also surprising. It was kind of reaffirming this is an important topic, something we need to discuss. Uh, it was, and I like numbers, so the statistics, the numbers, the figures that they give, that's okay. It's not just an opinion here. They do have the evidence. Like, I don't know if this is completely true. It depends on the data, depends on the source of the data. But for instance, when that statistic that they gave in the article, that when the percentage of white families reaches 50% or less, then you see an exodus of white folks, moving out of the church. That's I'm like I'm not sure if I have seen that. Me personally, being part of the Presbyterian Church in America, I don't know if I can validate that. All depends what churches they look, what their data source. But it was interesting and kind of makes sense. I'm not saying it's true, but kind of makes sense. So the sources, the numbers, and the formality they treated the topic, the way they did it, those were surprising. I was surprised by that.
Yeah, I appreciated that too. The statistics they gave of kind of the percentage of the church that were people of color and things like that. Which to me, and this, I'm about to ask you a question that was not on our list, but so I went and did some digging for Gwinnett County just to see what our demographics were like. And I was curious, like, how much do you feel like the local church should match the demographics of the surrounding area? Yeah.
That is a great question. It is a great question because I'm not sure if I would categorize that idea. That's a prevailing idea in church planting circles these days. And it very often, if you go to a church planting conference or if you gather with any kind of church planting group, they will tell you the church should reflect the demographics. It should be like the community around it. And I believed that for a long while. Now, it's not that I don't believe it. Now I question where this idea has taken us, what direction has led us into, because it is possible, this is my opinion, it is possible for a church to be a faithful church, a healthy church in Gwinnett County, and be only one language, only one group, what ethnic group. It could be. I'm convinced of that. I'm like, yeah, that's possible. That doesn't mean that the leadership is not open or they don't care about others. It just means that this is the call that God has given them. I'll give you an example. Down the road here, there is I think it's a Greek Orthodox church or it's a Greek church on Satellite Boulevard. So it means that there's people here who speak Greek, here in Gwinnett County. Should every church in Gwinnett County have a Greek ministry? Is that the question? And I don't think so. I don't think that's the call. There are certain churches that are going to have that call. I got into a big debate with a group of, I was in a group of pastors, and one pastor was very emphatic, and he was saying the call for the church is to be culturally diverse. You have to be culturally diverse. If you're not culturally diverse, you're disobeying God. That was his position. And I don't think so. I disagree with that statement. Now that I say that, I do believe that the local church has to be aware of the surroundings. And for instance, if Gwinnett County, which is now very diverse, if we have a church that is not open to diversity, that's a question that what is in the heart of the leaders here? What is the reason they're not pursuing diversity? What is the reason they're not welcoming diversity? So at the bottom, then, it's an issue of the heart. Is how faithfully are we pursuing God's call for our church? I think that's the question we need to be asking.
And with that in mind, I do have some questions. I want to get back to the article, but with that in mind, I think it leads perfectly into the description of how has God called us in this particular area, and how would you put that into words?
Well, I think
specifically Christos.
I'm surprised. I'm surprised, and this is going to sound very weird. Okay, very, very weird. And um, I'm not saying it. I'm not saying it because for any credit to me at all. What is that expression in English? Something about sounding your own horn.
Tooting your own
Something
horn.
about
Tooting.
something like t t t,
Yeah.
something like that. Okay, so yeah, okay. So that's not what I'm doing here. Okay, or I'm trying not to anyway. Um, but something that to, I'm very encouraged by reading the article is that some of the parameters that they use to determine if the racial divide is being breached, some of those parameters are the fundamentals of Christos community. I was like, oh wow, look, what they say is needed is what we have been saying for years now that we need to do. Um, one big issue in the article is the leadership, and they say is there diversity in the leadership? I don't mean to be too, how to say, abrasive, but Matt, you're in the minority in the session, for instance,
Yes.
right? I mean,
yes.
for a while, our session was the only session in Metro Atlanta Presbytery that spoke Spanish. That we were all Hispanic in the in the session. And then you look at our deacons. Granted, we have two deacons, um, but we can make the case that 50% is African American. We can say that. We can say the senior pastor is a minority member. Things that other churches are working towards, obtaining. Those issues were those elements were present in Christos from the beginning, or were very intentionally pursued. So, it's like an affirmation of our call. That's what I'm trying to say.
I will have
when
to
I
say
look at the article.
I will have to say I felt a bit of pride at that as well. So I don't know if that's a sinful pride or not, but I was happy to see that as well.
No, I think it's something we need to celebrate. It's something that we need to, we need to celebrate. Second is that, talking about our call, I believe that something that we are not doing correctly at Christos, that's too harsh. Again, something that we can improve on is, one, to appreciate the diversity that God has given us, to celebrate the diversity that God has given us, and to share it, to talk to others about this diversity and these crazy ideas that God has given us. Because I think that we have reached a point where we treat this as normal, when we treat Christos community as, sure, that's the way it is. And it's not. This is not the way things are. And this is not normal. So we need to appreciate it. We need to protect it, but also we need to promote it. We need to share with others and say, hey, this is the kind of church that we are. Not perfect at all. But there is this, since the inception of the congregation, this intentionality of pursuing diversity. Now, let me circle back to what the article mentions in terms of, or the goal of the article. Christos community, our goal, our desire is not that we check our ethnicity at the door. That has never been never. We are not calling people to forget who they are. Actually, we want people to celebrate who they are, in terms, but also we want to be redeemed. We want to redeem culture. We want God to redeem culture. So in that regard, and this is one of the pillars that I see in our congregation, that I'm like so glad that we put it there. One of those big rocks that we put in there, when we say we want everyone to be equally uncomfortable. Everyone should be equally uncomfortable, and that's by design. Which I think that's what the article talks about. when they say that even when there's ethnic diversity or ethnical diversity, um, there's still, I think they call it white supremacy. I think they use that term in the article.
Hmm.
Even when there's different people, different races in the congregation, there's still some white supremacy. To me, it means that, yeah, you come over here, but whoever is we in charge, we feel comfortable because we are in charge and we're doing things our way. So there's a group of people that is very comfortable, and there's a group of people that need to adapt. And Christus, we all need to adapt. There is no one single group that is comfortable, and that's by design. So I'm very glad the wisdom that God gave us when we began our church, where we say,
Yeah.
yeah, everyone is going to be a little uncomfortable.
Yeah, I saw that as one of the kind of the main points of the article was people almost seem to fear giving up a part of themselves. There's a bit of identity kind of tied up in that, and I really
Yeah.
like what you're saying about everyone has to be a little uncomfortable, give up some degree of that. But I also think when I saw that, I thought about uh, our greater identity being in Christ. And so what
Yes.
makes us kind of able to be uncomfortable is resting in the greater identity that we have in Christ.
Oh, absolutely. And that's why we say, and again, intentionally, we don't say Christus community is a multicultural church. We try to avoid that. We say that we are culturally diverse or ethnically diverse, but we try to subscribe to this culture of grace. So we all are being moved towards God's grace. In that process, we need to give up some of our cultural preferences, and that's
Mhm.
painful. But we're gaining this affirmation of our identity in Christ, and that is delightful. So there is this exchange that is taking place, which is all part of the spiritual formation. That's why we emphasize, and that's the first thing that we say, it's God's grace. We need His grace. We depend on His grace. We seek His grace. Um, because of that, giving away, or no, I don't want to say renouncing, because that's not the word. Really, that's not what we need to renounce to whatever is sinful. Yes.
Right, but it's a shifting in priority, maybe. Uh,
Yes, and it's a shifting in priority. It's a shifting in treasuring. I'm going to use that word. Like before, I was you really before, like many years ago, I could have been categorized correctly as a nationalist in the wrong way. I was a nationalist. I was a communist. I was I don't know what else to say. Racist. Yeah, all those things. I was that, and of course, I need to renounce to that. Let me clarify, if the word being nationalist is being used incorrectly, in terms of supremacy, is Mexico and then everyone else, Mexicans are at the top and everyone else is at the bottom. If that's what I mean, then yes, I need to renounce to that. Uh, and there is this change. I don't treasure that anymore.
hmm.
I don't. I put it apart. I don't treasure it as much. I still treasure my heritage. I still treasure who I am. I treasure my story. I treasure my history. I treasure all that, but not as much as serving others, serving somebody who before I was antagonistic towards. You know,
Right.
so there is this transformation, and that's why something, for instance, and I wasn't expecting it from the article, but that uh, that's one of those indicators of, are we are we reducing this racial divide? To me, one huge indicator is humility. that to me, just like grace, we can say that grace is the fuel, and then humility is the result, is the product that comes out of the process. So you have grace that fuels this process in the middle, and the process generates humility. Which means, what I'm trying to say is that there should be this ability that increases with time, where I can set aside all that I am here on earth for the benefit of somebody else, so that I may see where I'm going to be in heaven. Kind of is that exchange that we're talking about, that transformation,
right,
that we're talking about. And then I treasure less and less being Mexican, and I treasure less and less being Democrat or Republican or whatever. What is the other, independents, or there's another group, forgot the name. Anyway, so I what is it? Now I'm not. I need to know now. Independent? No.
There's the Green Party.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I whatever it may be, I just set it apart.
Oh, you're talking about.
And I don't treasure as much as.
Oh gosh, what is it? It's
libertarian.
Yeah.
Libertarian. Okay. Yeah. So whatever that may be, I just set it apart, and I don't value it that much. I still value it, but not that much. And humility is that.
Right.
I think. Yeah.
I think that's really good. I'm going to pivot a little bit. I'm going to ask you one more question, and then we'll close after that. Closing question. So the article focuses an awful lot on African American and white, and just a very small mention of Latinos. And I'm curious, in your mind, how do you read that kind of as a Latino, and how does that change the character of the article?
One thing is, it shows how complex the issue is to me, because it makes two things. It shows the complexity of the issue. At the same time, it shows that narrow of the definitions or the views. Every time we talk about racial reconciliation, 99% of the time we're talking about black and white, 99% of the time. So this article, in a way, promotes exactly what the article said is trying to avoid, which is exclusion. I can make a case that I feel excluded from the article, and yet the article is about racial reconciliation, about bringing different races together, and I can say, well, you did a pretty bad job because you didn't include Hispanics and this, or Latinos. So that's one thing. Other thing is, I don't really feel excluded.
Sure.
I don't, because, and this is my opinion. Okay, my opinion is that historically there's a historical precedent here. Of course, because of slavery. What was it? 300 years of slavery in the U.S.
Yeah.
I mean, we cannot pretend that wound is going just to disappear in a couple of years. It's a big gash in the nation.
Yeah.
And it was African, or it was black and white. So in that regard, we Hispanics, we Latinos, we're coming late to the conversation. Let me say that. We're coming late. It wasn't the relationship between the US and the Hispanic countries, or the Latin America. It wasn't as bad as slavery, really. Right. It was bad in some occasions, yeah, but it wasn't as bad. So I don't think, like me personally, I don't approach this discussion as if somebody owes me something. Not really. I wasn't expecting this article to include Hispanics. But again, it's interesting to me because it's almost like we're digging a hole ourselves. I'll tell you just quickly a story. to illustrate my point, we work on a pastoral letter for racial reconciliation in our denomination, and then we work at the presbytery level. And I remember at the presbytery meeting where we were discussing all these things, and we have lunch, and then we're walking from where we had lunch to the sanctuary where the working sessions were taking place. And on the walk, an officer or somebody, a leader in our presbytery, approached me and he said, "How do you feel about all this, Alex?" I'm like, "Yeah, this is a great job. I think we're doing great." I said, "No, but how do you feel about Hispanics not being included in this letter? Should we do something about that?" He asked me that question. Should we also include something about reconciliation between the U.S. or whites and Hispanics? And I said, "Brother, what are you gonna do? Are you gonna write 17 letters? Because the relationship between the U.S. and Mexico is not the same as the relationship between the U.S. and Colombia and
Right.
Guatemala and Nicaragua. So what are we talking about here? One and two, we are not expecting that. We are okay. I don't think, because the problem was not as big.
Right.
It may have been big, but really, I mean, with all honesty, I cannot consider a bigger crime to humanity. Maybe I'm exaggerating, but I cannot consider a bigger crime to humanity than slavery.
Yeah.
Really. I mean, that was terrible. It was horrible. So I'm okay. I'm okay if they just mention it, passing by. I'm okay being that token Hispanic in the article. That's fine.
Awesome.
That's okay.
Well, and then let's close. We're actually going slightly over what we'd like to do, but real quick, I'd love it if you could boil it down for everybody. What do we do now?
Yes.
What does this mean for our daily life?
I will insist, and they mentioned it in the article. There is a level of intentionality that is required. There is a level of awareness that is required. We cannot pretend that we're not part of the problem. We cannot pretend that God is not calling us to be part of the solution either. So we should embrace this idea that God is calling us to be an instrument of His reconciliation. He actually used that word, you have been reconciled to God so that you may do this ministry of reconciliation. So that's my advice for our church. Let us be aware, let us be intentional, and let us be actively involved in bringing this solution. If not perfectly, but at least a taste of the solution.
Awesome. Great thoughts to close on. And again, I'd like to thank the people who are listening. Thank you for joining us. We will be producing these episodes every couple of weeks. If you have ideas for things we should talk about, if you have questions, or if you want to fill Alex's email box with angry letters, feel free to do that too.
That will work. That's fine. I have a filter, so I have a way to filter all that emails. So send it in.
Yeah, send in emails, send in comments. We'd love to hear from you.
My email address is mattmcnair@christuscommunity.org.
Awesome.
That was fun.
Thank you, guys. Have a good day.
Thank you.